Hello everyone, and welcome to the Riverwood Conservancy's webinar, Endangered Species, Bald Eagles with Dave Taylor. My name is Stephanie. I'm the Community Program Coordinator at the Riverwood Conservancy. I hope everyone is having a lovely evening. I want to say a special thanks to Credit Valley Conservation for supporting all of the work that we do. And before we get started this evening, I have a lot of exciting updates for you all, so hang tight as we get through them, and then we can pass it over to Dave as well. So our August and September programs are now live on our website, so please register for as many virtual or in-person programs as you would like. On your screen now, you should see our entire calendar of events. This one is for August, and then this one is for September. Anything in green is in-person programming, and anything in yellow is virtual programs like this one we're watching right now. Please register for any of these programs at the riverwoodconservancy.org/events. As well, starting September 16th, we have an 8-week course on ecopsychology, and this is led by Mamona Hussein. This course aims to provide an experience where you will interact with others and share nature-based experiences to help bring hope, resilience, and positivity into your life right now, which I think we all need at the moment. And also, starting October 1st through October 31st, we have another month-long BioBlitz on iNaturalist, all thanks to the support from Climate Impact. Our hope is to better understand the impact of climate change on our flora and fauna populations through a fun citizen science project. We have some cool prizes to offer, including the grand prize that will go to the person with the most observed species throughout the month. And you can join just going to iNaturalist and typing in TRC Fall BioBlitz 2021 that you see on your screen now, and just click join. Right now we have 9 members, but there are going to be more and more people as the month approaches. And I will post all these links into the chat as well. And if you would like to support our virtual and on-site programs, as well as conservation of Riverwood's habitat and wildlife, please consider donating on our website. We greatly appreciate any small contribution you can make. Before we get to Dave today, the Riverwood Conservancy would like to acknowledge that the land on which we operate is the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional homeland of the Anishinaabe, Wendat, and Haudenosaunee nations. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this place is still home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on this land. And this evening, we have Dave Taylor, who is a wildlife photographer and author of more than 40 books on wildlife and ecology. His most recent book, Black Bears: A Natural History, 2nd edition, is available now. Dave also focuses his efforts on producing educational videos and material about wildlife for both the public and to support school curriculum. He has traveled throughout the world capturing nature with his camera, and he frequently visits Tanzania, where he guides wildlife safaris. Dave taught science and geography for more than 30 years and nature photography at Humber College for more than 25 years. And today he is a consultant for the Riverwood Conservancy. So welcome, Dave. We also have Thomas, a longtime volunteer with the Riverwood Conservancy, and thank you so much, Thomas, for joining us and helping out this evening as well. If you have any questions for Dave, we will be answering them at the end of the presentation. You can post them in the Q&A or comment section, and we will be getting to them at the end. Whew, that's all from me. Dave, I will pass it over to you. Thanks so much for joining us again.
Thank you, Stephanie. Great introduction, and you make me feel really old. Imagine teaching 60 years nearly, but they were concurrent, the teaching job. So I'd like to welcome everybody. We're going to talk about eagles tonight. The bald eagle, this is listed as endangered species, the bald eagle. The good news is that the bald eagle has been delisted by both the Canadian Wildlife Service and by the United States. However, it is still listed as a species of concern in Ontario. Hopefully that will change. This past year, I had the opportunity to do some work observing bald eagle's nest. And I'm going to start out with some of the video that I shot from it to give you a feeling of what it's like to watch eagles in the wild. So I'm going to share my screen here, and hopefully everything will work. And I got one more thing to do before I share that. And Stephanie will tell me if you're not seeing the video. This video was shot in Southern Ontario. And basically I spent one day a week observing this nest. And I would be there anywhere from 6 to 8 hours. Could you ever be foolish enough to want to do something like this? You should note that in 6 to 8 hours, nothing much happens at a bald eagle's nest. I observed one in Jasper. My wife and I were out visiting Canadian Rocky Mountain parks, and we came across this nest not too far from the town site. And I have to say my wife was really patient. She spent the first 3 days for about 6 to 8 hours watching that nest. The eagle didn't even leave for most of the time I observed it. Finally, it did fly off the nest, flew around the circle, and came back. I don't know when the youngster was being fed, but it was being fed. The larger of the eagles is the female. The one that is standing taller is probably the male. Hard to judge. I can't say that during the 8 hours a day I spent there, I was ever bored. Occasionally there were other photographers to talk to, although they were few and far between. Just spending time with an eagle, even if it's just doing this. You might notice how the young have changed. They've gone from gray to quite dark. Once the young are getting ready to fledge, parents do not spend as much time sitting on the nest, but they're usually with an eyesight. For the first two or three weeks, once the eagles start to fledge, they stay very close to the nest. Then they enter a stage where they start to fly off and they come back to the nest. And then probably, I think it's about 8 weeks, 9 weeks, they will start to roam. These birds are just about ready to fly away, but they won't fly far. This is the youngster that's climbing, looking like the grass with the base. Okay, now I'm going to go into the slide talk here, folks. So just give me a second to switch screens again. And here we go. So, subject is bald eagles. They're called bald eagles because of the white on their heads. I've heard 3 stories as to why they're called bald eagles. One, I guess the whiteness reminded settlers that these animals made them think they didn't have any feathers on their head. Second was a short form for bald pate. And then there was another suggestion that the bald thing came from a word that I cannot recall at the moment, but basically it meant white-headed, I believe. However, the standard story is people saw the white head and thought, oh, that's bird's bald, like a vulture. We'll call it the bald eagle. Bald eagles are really fish eagles. They're raptors. They are birds of prey. So they're related to hawks and kites and African vultures, distantly related to our turkey vulture. And if you are out in southern Ontario and you see a large bird flying overhead, the most likely candidate for that is a turkey vulture. Many people have mistaken the turkey vulture for a bald eagle. Turkey vultures have a dihedral wing. Their wings are like this. I don't know if you can see me. And they ride the wind, whereas bald eagles basically have a flatter, more level profile when they're flying and gliding. They like to nest in the tallest tree in the neighborhood. And it's great if it's branching. And they like that nest to have at least a 30-centimeter diameter. And for good reason, that nest has got to be supported. So the male will start to build the nest, female will help, and they will build on that nest each and every year. So a nest can weigh well over a ton. And usually it is a strong windstorm that brings it down, because after 15, actually up to 35 years, some birds have used the same nest. The tree gets older, the nest gets heavier, and eventually it comes crashing down. There is a fair amount of fidelity to their nesting area. They go back year after year to the same nest as long as that nest is standing. And if that nest should fall down, they often will find another place to nest. I have seen up in Alaska bald eagles nesting on the ground, usually on a bit of a rocky cliff area. Golden eagles are much more likely to do that than bald eagles. And golden eagles are not very closely related to bald eagles. Bald eagles are fish eagles. The other fish eagle that, if you've ever been on safari in Africa, the one you would recognize is the fish eagle, and it looks an awful lot like a bald eagle. There's also Steller's eagle up in northern part of Russia, with a few of them living in Alaska. And it's a much bigger eagle than the bald eagle. Not that the bald eagle is small. Typically, they lay 2 to 3 eggs, occasionally 4. The eggs hatch a few days apart. The youngest to hatch is always the most vulnerable. It's like the spare, in case the other 2 don't make it because it gets too cold. It may just sneak in and survive. Often, if there's not a lot of food, its siblings will eat it or push it out of the nest. Parents will feed the birds themselves. They feed the ones whose mouths are gaping the most. So this eagle this summer or this year managed to raise 3, which is pretty good. Obviously, she was bringing a lot of food in, although I have to say, in about 50 hours of watching, I never once saw the parents bring in food. I heard from other photographers that were luckier than I that they saw her bring in a fish now and again, once a rabbit. But they were obviously leaving food in the nest because I was watching them feed quite a bit. And the youngsters will watch for the parents to come in. It's a good way of telling if a parent's coming in. You just watch the youngsters looking up in the sky. So as they get older, they start to branch out, literally branch out. Sometimes they fall out of the tree. I was observing a Cooper's hawk as well, going to its nest on a regular basis. And one of the 3 babies in that nest fell out and was later brought back by wildlife rescue and put back in the nest, and then it fell out again and unfortunately perished. I think a dog got it. So the 3 chicks in the Cooper's hawk nest, only 1 survived. In this case, all 3 of these eaglets managed to fledge. They will not develop the white head until they're almost 5 years old. Between 4 and 6, generally by 5.5 years, the eagle is considered to be mature and will have its white head. They are magnificent flyers. They have a wingspan of about 2 meters. They can weigh up to 7 kilograms. They are strong enough to pick up a small dog, but they don't do that. I don't think there's any documented cases of these eagles picking up pets or baby lambs. More likely to fall into that category would be the golden eagle. And we do have golden eagles in Ontario. There are not many of them, very many of them. They look a little bit like an immature bald eagle. When they're mature, the golden eagle has a goldenish looking head. It's quite a spectacular bird. You would be forgiven if you saw this bird and you thought it might be a golden eagle. The amount of feathering on the white tells you this is, or on the chest tells you this is probably getting into its 2nd year, maybe 3rd year. Oops, sorry, I put the wrong button there. My fault. They get darker in the chest as they age. This one's got a fish that's eating. They eat a variety of food. If you watch the video that I've posted with Stephanie, you might, if you're watching very quickly, see a bald eagle on a deer carcass. Now the deer was not killed by the eagle. What had happened was wolves had gotten that. And basically, if you're in Yellowstone and you're watching eagles and you see eagles hanging around someplace, you're almost certain to see wolves. I would say the presence of bald eagles in Yellowstone is the 2nd best indicator that there are wolves around. The best indicator, other than seeing the wolf, is ravens. And ravens will mob an eagle. They will try and steal its fish. I've seen that happen. Eagles, however, are great thieves. They will go after osprey and try and steal their fish. And they're not adverse to stealing the fish of another bird. It's not unusual when you see a congregation of bald eagles to see the younger eagles that look bigger because they're more fluffier than the adults, chasing an adult bird, maybe its own parent, trying to steal the fish that the parent bird has caught. Another place that you can look for eagles, if you're ever in a dump up north, especially in the fall, they tend to hang around in the pine trees along with vultures and the gulls. They're there to feed on some of the human, food that we throw out. And I don't doubt that they take the occasional gull. I was up in the subarctic doing some work with beluga whales, and we're out in the dinghy, the Zodiac, and we looked over and there was a flock of geese taking off, and in flew a bald eagle and grabbed the goose. And the goose is a fairly good sized bird. I've also seen them grab fish that were too big for them. And then what they do is they try and swim ashore, and they're not bad swimmers. They oar themselves like this with their wings. I remember watching one from the Alaska ferry that had to swim a good football field length, finally got ashore and dragged the fish with it. These two juveniles are fighting over a fish. You'll also see this talon to talon thing during the early winter. It's part of, we think, the mating ritual. One will swoop down with its talons out. The lower one will swing up and they'll grab their talons and they'll lock and they'll tumble quite a distance, which is really spectacular to watch. This is a young bird chasing an adult. These are two youngsters flying after two adults. As far as I can remember, there were no fish involved in this. They were just all going the same direction. There are places where you can see upwards to 400 eagles from one spot that you're standing, and that's where some of the video was shot that you will see if you go to those sites. There are several places, one in Mississippi, there's one in Delaware, there's several in Alaska, but there are eagles that stay around Peterborough. They feed on the remains of deer that the hunters have left behind. When they clean the deer, they leave this pile of intestines and the eagles will feed on it. And in New Brunswick, there used to be, I don't know if they're still there, a person who would put out dead chickens for the eagles, and he would have 30, 40, 50 eagles coming in. The good news is the eagles are making a really solid return. Ontario had a lot of eagles back in the, around the 1800s, when Europeans first started to settle here after the War of Independence with between the United States and Great Britain. The Loyalists came up to Ontario, and there were reports of an eagle nest every kilometer or a kilometer and a half along the shore of Lake Ontario. That's a lot of eagles. Now, there were a lot of fish then too. There were a lot of Atlantic salmon living in the lake, and they would come up and spawn. It's interesting that I have yet to see, speaking of Atlantic salmon spawning, I have yet to see a bald eagle actually on the river in Riverwood. Now, Stephanie, our hostess, she photographed one with her iPhone a few months ago flying over, but I've never seen them actually land in the river. Now, in Alaska, I've drifted down the Haines River, and there's just eagle after eagle, and they're not swooping down grabbing the fish like this. Once the salmon are spent, the eagle simply walks into the water, grabs the fish with his talons, and then walks out. And then if it's being pestered by other eagles, it will fly away. Of course, there are grizzly bears present, so it has a tendency to want to fly away. They are a magnificent bird. We lost them in the 50s due to DDT, which was a chemical they were spraying for insects. Now, bald eagles don't eat insects, but they eat animals that do eat insects, and they were what happens is the DDT chemicals would build up into the system of the eagle. It would affect the quality of their eggs. Their eggs would crack upon laying, and the eagle population just plummeted. And we lost most, if not all, of our eagles in southern Ontario. They kind of did all right up around Lake of the Woods, and they did really well in British Columbia and Alaska, and they did fairly well down in Florida. And we, back in the late 80s, I think it was, down at Long Point, they started to rehabilitate eagles and release them from captive situations where they would build a nest, and they would train the eagle to take food and train it to be an eagle. That's probably one of the reasons we have eagles back. But the other reason probably is simply we got rid of DDT and we've improved the environment enough. There's still lots of problems with climate change, but we've improved the environment enough that the eagles seem to be making their way back. Certainly, if you go down to Port Credit and you spend enough time there, you're going to see bald eagles fly over. The best place to see a bald eagle that I know of is down around Hamilton Harbor in the Royal Botanical Gardens. There's a pair that nests there, but that pair has been nesting there for a few years now, and their youngsters are coming back, and it's a good spot to look for eagles. You're just driving along the QEW, you may very well see an eagle. So it's a wonderful bird to see. There are more and more of them around. They're still not as common as the Ontario government would like them to be, but they are making a comeback. I'll close this off, and now we'll take some questions. Hi, Stephanie.
Hello, thanks so much, Dave. Lots of questions actually coming in on Facebook and on Zoom, which is awesome. Somebody has asked, do they clean up the nest like other birds do?
I think what you're referring to is grabbing the droppings and flying away with them.
Yes.
I have never seen them do that. Robins do it, lots of songbirds do it. I don't know the answer. In all my eagle watching, I have never seen them actually carry away anything that looked like debris.
Right.
What I do see is them coming to the edge of the nest, the youngsters, and pooping out. And they squirt it with enough force that it gets a distance from the tree. I think it's a good thing that they vacate the nest after 4 or 5 months hanging around it, because I'm sure there's a lot of maggots and insects and ticks and stuff. I just wouldn't want to lie down in the nest. This doesn't strike me as fun.
Probably smelly too.
Yeah, I would think so.
There's a question here from Heather. Our 7-year-old son is curious about how falcons and eagles are alike and are different. Which one is more ferocious?
Well, yeah, they're both living flying dinosaurs, so they're both ferocious, especially if you're their prey. Falcons have narrow wings. Their wings are more pointy. They're faster flyers. The bald eagle is a soarer. Its wings are very wide, so it rides the air. The peregrine falcon is the fastest living animal, I think, on Earth. It can dive at well over 100K. The bald eagle can dive pretty fast, and falcons generally tend to be smaller than bald eagles. So the bald eagle might be this big. A falcon, it's still a substantial bird. You wouldn't want to mess with one. If you ever find an eagle that's injured, or a falcon or a hawk, you don't want to go up and grab them, because they can do some damage. You put a towel or something over the head, that tends to calm them down. And I should point out that I think in the United States, and I believe in Canada, it is illegal to possess or own any part of a bald eagle because of their significance to the religious ceremonies of the indigenous people. That has obviously changed as we become more aware of indigenous rights. There was a time when the biggest threat to bald eagles was people shooting them. Even conservationists would shoot bald eagles. There was a famous conservationist in Southern Ontario that got fined after eagles were protected for shooting a golden eagle to protect his waterfowl. Farmers really thought the eagles were bad. They didn't realize that the eagles were doing them a huge favor by getting rid of a lot of the animals that really would destroy their chickens' eggs. Owls were lumped in the same category, and they were prosecuted until probably the 40s, when we started to get more of an understanding of the value of predators. So, next question.
This one's coming from Facebook from Kelly. So are there bald eagles for sure along Credit River Valley and Mississauga area?
I have heard rumors that I have not bothered to pursue because it could be on private property, that there were eagles nesting along the Credit River within the Mississauga border. I won't say anything more than that. They won't be nesting now. I think there is some reasonable, there's a logic to that because we are seeing eagles down at Port Credit so often. However, they could as well be the eagles from the Royal Botanical Gardens in Hamilton flying along looking for fish. Again, I've not really seen eagles in the trees at Riverwood. Now we get osprey, which used to be called a fish eagle, but it's not related to eagles. And the osprey turn up every September and October. We see a few osprey in the trees feeding on the salmon. I just am at a loss after all the years of salmon runs here, why bald eagles are not coming in and feeding on our salmon. The only reason I can think of is there's so many fishermen down there that the eagles don't feel comfortable. But I don't know. But yeah, there could be eagles nesting in Mississauga. I wouldn't be surprised. I've seen eagles nest in towns in a couple of places, and that surprised me. I always thought they were wilderness birds, and they're adapting to people.
Right. And is it important to not share where you see an eagle's nest, Dave?
I think I wouldn't want to publicize it.
Right.
You're probably not going to do much to damage the nest because they're going to be at the top of a tall tree. And the nests that I've observed, while they were close to where people were living, they were still protected by a waterway and a cliff, and you couldn't get to them. The danger about sharing an eagle's nest, I think, is really trespassing. There are places where you go in Ontario that people are irate and they just hate birders because a few bad apples want to go see a bird and they traipse across somebody's property without getting permission. They do damage to the crops, or they go in somebody's backyard.
Right.
So as a general rule, I'm against sharing location of nesting birds. Certainly if you know somebody and you trust them 100%, that's fine. But I would suggest as a general rule, you wouldn't post it on Facebook or TikTok or anything like that.
TikTok.
Yeah, well, I'm with it. You know, I may look old, but I'm a happening person.
Do a little dance in front of an eagle.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's actually a couple people that are sharing on Facebook right now that they've seen bald eagles in the area. Someone said Britannia Road and 407. Yep. Another person said Streetsville and 407. So they are for sure here, just yep. Not as easy
They're
to
more
find.
Here now than there were when I started working at Riverwood in 2003.
Oh, wow.
And definitely the sightings are way up.
That's awesome.
I wouldn't say it's an everyday event.
Right.
But it's, And now that the youngsters are starting to move out, it's more likely to you'll see more eagles because they got to find food, and they do migrate. I think our Ontario eagles, the ones around Lake Ontario, because there's so many places they can get fish, especially around any of the power plants where there's warm water. The one down by Port Dover is a place that's known for that. The fish kind of congregate in the warmer water and the eagles can get through them. And then there are people that leave their carcasses of deer around, and there's roadkills. The bald eagle is basically a scavenger. It's more of a scavenger than a predator. I mean, there's the famous story about Benjamin Franklin, who wanted to have the turkey as the bird for the United States, the national bird. And he argued that the turkey had a lot of virtues. It was, good to eat for one thing, but it, a good parent and all of that. And he said the bald eagle, well, that was basically a scavenger because it would come around and eat dead animals that the farmers left in the field. And Benjamin Franklin had not a very high opinion of the American bird of prey, national bird of prey. So, yeah.
Interesting. And actually, you alluded to migration. There's two questions that came up. Do eagles live here in the winter, or do they go south? And then there was another one as well about where they migrate to.
Yes, they do live here in the winter, but they will move to where there are food sources. There are food sources down along the coast of the United States, south of, New Jersey and south. And that tends to be where a lot will congregate. There were 400, one spot I counted 300 just standing still. And I counted 300 eagles, and some of them were above my head in the tree. It was just unbelievable. When I was drifting down that river in Alaska, easily saw 50, 60 eagles. And in the real fall season, when they congregate there, you'll see upwards to 1,000. I mean, they're like seagulls on a beach. It is amazing to see it. And there's a place near Whistler, Squamish, BC, where the eagles congregate on another few weeks, and hundreds will be seen there too. There are two subspecies of eagles. I'm not sure that that's really identified. There's a southern bald eagle, which you see in Florida, which is smaller and more resident than the bald eagles we get up here. Our bald eagles tend to be migratory. The southern ones tend not to be migratory, but these birds, if they're getting lots of food, will stay put. Like our turkey vultures, they leave. The bald eagles tend to hang around. So you can see them, especially where there's a lot of ducks. If people are feeding ducks someplace, almost for sure you're going to get a bald eagle or a snowy owl going around there.
That's awesome, Dave. I'm just laughing here. Trisha is just goofing with you a little bit here. She said, "Did you just say seagull, Dave?"
Yes, I did. And folks, there is no such thing as a seagull. There are gulls, and there are all types of gulls. But I fell into the sort of I was lazy. I should have said gulls. Trisha, I'll get you for that.
I thought you would enjoy that one.
Blushing, Trisha.
Rachel asked, do they puke up or chew their food for babies like other birds? Good question.
All of the times I've watched eagles feed their babies, I've never once seen them regurgitate.
Okay.
Bring in the carcass, and I've seen them tear it apart and feed little bits to their babies. Cormorants are, I've watched, I've got video of them. The baby sticks its mouth in the mother's mouth, and you see the fish slide down. I've seen herons do that. I've never seen a bald eagle do that. It would be really cool if they did, but I don't believe they do. They seem to carry their prey back in a talon, usually 1 foot, holding it and flying back. I've certainly, found the remains of rabbits below their nests and things like that, as with same with great horned owls. No, I don't think they regurgitate. I could be wrong in that, but I've never seen it, and I've never seen pictures of them doing it.
Right.
I've seen lots of other birds do it though in the field. So.
There's someone that just said, Lori said, we are lucky to have eagles in our backyard, which is pretty cool. I don't know where Lori's located, but that would be pretty awesome to have them in your backyard as well.
Yeah.
M has asked, what is the lifespan of an eagle, females versus males?
I really can't tell you the difference between the lifespan of each of the two sexes. They do live up to 35 years because they've been documented using the same nest for that period of time. I think it's much more likely 15 to 20 years. The real problem that eagles facing now has to do with lead poisoning. There's if there's any hunters in there that right, Stephanie, but there's a real movement to get rid of lead shot, because lead shot stays in the water when the duck hunters are out there, or it stays in the wounded duck and it gets away, and the lead gets into the gizzard of the eagle and it doesn't get digested. It just sits there and slowly poisons them to death. And lead shot is not just poisoning bald eagles, it's poisoning waterfowl, swans, ducks, geese, other birds. But the reason there's a lot of resistance against giving up lead shot, I think a lot of responsible hunters don't use it anymore, is because the brass shot, which does not harm the birds, apparently, unless they're shot with it, it doesn't leak chemicals into the bird, but it's more expensive. So I think you're going to see some legislatures actually pass laws against the use of lead in the water. There's a lot of conservation groups who are speaking out about this as a problem for a lot of different birds of prey, waterfowl, things like that.
Is that similar to the lead weights that
fishermen use?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing.
But the pellets are smaller.
Right.
So a duck, for instance, or a swan will ingest some of these pellets as if they're a little gravel to help them break up food in their gizzard. And then it stays there, and then along comes an eagle, kills the duck or the swan, I guess, or the goose, feeds on it and ingests some of those pellets. And so it's a real concern. I'm not anti-hunting, but I certainly, I'm aware that the lead is a concern.
Right.
Get the lead out is a common cry among conservation groups, I think.
Right. Well, they got rid of the lead pencil, so I think it's time we get rid of all lead things and related things. M has asked, do their eyes change color like people's do as they mature? What color are their eyes, by the way?
The eagles in the video had very rich brown eyes, I think. I know that osprey's eyes change. I do not know whether bald eagle eyes change. I don't know. That's a good question. The reason I think I know that osprey's eyes change is because that's one of the easier ways of telling whether it's an immature or mature osprey. We don't use that technique with the bald eagles because the white head is the giveaway, not the eyes. So, but if you look at the birds of prey at Riverwood, we have this wood tree that's been carved into birds of prey. I asked the fellow when he was carving it to make one an osprey, and of course they look the same. You couldn't tell from their shapes whether they're ospreys or eagles, but he put golden eyes into the one that's the osprey. So next time you're at Riverwood, see if you can spot the one with the golden eye. It's not real gold, by the way. It's just paint. May not even
go steal it. Somebody actually saw a bald eagle today in Orangeville, which is pretty cool.
Oh, I think that's not unusual because of Luther Marsh up there.
Right.
Yeah, and you've got the Island Lake. I wouldn't be surprised if there was eagles nesting in or around that area. They'll nest upwards to a mile from water, but they're always going to be in close proximity to water. So eagle nests are turning up all over the place. So I'm not surprised. I was looking at some papers published a few years ago, 2008, and the bald eagle nesting sort of went along south of the 401. There were nests north of the 401 till you get up to the Bruce Peninsula and north of almost Huntsville. There were no eagle nests reported. I'm sure today that would change. I'm sure the Hamilton Naturalist Club or somebody has published or done some research on nesting birds, and I'm sure the bald eagle nests are much more common than they were 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. So, yeah.
Somebody commented, when I was growing up, DDT was decreasing bird populations by chemical poisoning. Are there any current or similar threats resulting in threatened or endangered species with regard to birds of prey and even songbirds? That's a good question.
Oh, lead poisoning, which we've already discussed for
Right.
sure. DDT is still a problem. I would say in Canada and the United States, there may be some individual cases where there are some local populations being threatened. Climate change is a bigger threat. Habitat loss is a bigger threat. But DDT is still being used in South America and in Central America. And that's where most of our birds migrate to. Right. So even though they're not being exposed to it up here, they are still being exposed to it down there. Same is true in Africa. And how do you tell a society who are losing people to malaria every year that they've got to stop spraying DDT or other chemicals, which are admittedly harmful to the environment, but which are saving people's lives? And that's the question. You know, I'm against DDT, don't get me wrong, but I do see the argument why they would continue using it. I think the solution is to come up with a product that is not going to harm wildlife, whether that's fish in the water, birds in the air, mammals on the ground, whatever, insects. You know, I am really concerned about insects. Mm-hmm. I was up in Algonquin Park a couple of days ago, and I can remember, not even 10 years ago, you would go up and your car would just be covered with insects. And it was more so 20 years ago and more so 30 years ago. Drove through the park a couple of times. I think I might have hit a couple of insects, but I didn't hit very many. And that is really a concern. Where are these insects going? Well, it's because we're spraying. You don't want insects in your backyard because you don't like being bitten by mosquitoes, so you spray for them. We've had a war with insects. I think we've been a little too successful. Mm-hmm. I think there's a time when we should just sort of shut up and put up with a few insect bites, because that's what feeds the bulk of our population. At Riverwood, we have this false sense of security because we get a lot of birds on our trail, but we're feeding the birds. We're supplementing that protein that would have been supplied by insects 20 years ago. And the further away you go, I mean, it's not just me. I mean, somebody mentioned this in a blog someplace, and I've talked to other people. We're all seeing it. So, and some of those birds would be prey for a bald eagle. So that's a bigger concern locally to me.
Right. Stuff
we're putting into the rivers and whatever, they're getting rid of insects.
Well, there's a lot of stuff that we can do as individuals, right? We can't always control what's done on the bigger scale, but small scale things like planting a garden to attract and help insect species. I mean, I'm pretty sure one of the biggest challenges for songbirds is window collisions and cat fatalities. Like, those things can be eliminated easily if you as an individual make a difference, right? So
cat on a leash.
Or indoors. Yeah. Or don't have a bird feeder if you know there's cats nearby. Like that's a really easy thing that you can do.
Or
So
don't have a bird feeder if you know there are bears nearby too.
right.
But that's
True.
another story.
Yes, awesome. We'll take just one more question here. There's a lot of really great comments about just what you've talked about this evening, Dave. And a lot of people commenting about times they've seen bald eagles as well, which is awesome. The last question is just how old do they get in the wild versus in captivity?
Animals live longer in captivity. So I would think 35, maybe even 40 years. There was one bird that shouldn't have lived very long, became the sort of the bird that the unit in the Civil War carried into battle with them. And one of the Southern generals was determined to capture the bird or kill it, and he wasn't successful. And I guess the bird survived. So he survived until 1881, I think it was, which I think was probably like 30, 35 years.
Wow.
I would guess, as I said before, 15, 20 years, maybe in the wild, but that's not an average. That's the unusual.
Right.
Most of the young birds are going to die because they're going to get hit by cars, or they're going to make a silly mistake. The ones that survive the first year are probably going to go on to live a fairly good life. By the time they get to be adults and they've established a breeding location, which they'll defend, they are probably going to last much, much longer. Probably being, they're loyal to their spouses, so probably that prolongs their lives too. So who knows? Little plug of fidelity. I have one more question that I was going to answer because Thomas asked it.
Yeah. Oh, right. I completely forgot.
And that is, how powerful are they? For a number of years, I consulted with the University of Guelph, and the pathologist there, Dr. Hunter, told this story. I think it happened to him, where a bald eagle, they would get these birds and they would rehabilitate them and help them get back and then release them in the wild. They got this bald eagle and he was handling it, and its claws went through his hand. So picture the bald eagle, you got these claws sticking out through your hand. How do you get rid of it? Well, if you flail around, the eagle tightens. So what I believe it was Dr. Hunter had to do, it was he just had to relax his hand, talk to the eagle nicely until the eagle removed the talons himself. Now, I'm not saying that's what I would do, but that's what he did. The other thing interesting was the birds tended to have a preference for the opposite sex. So if it was a female bird, it would like only the male handlers, and students, at Guelph would work for him. And the eagles that they would have a real anger towards either whatever that was opposite of their sex, apparently. I don't know why.
Wow.
Interesting, totally random story. There you go.
I think somebody's going to have a nightmare now about getting eagle talons stuck in their hand.
If you ever are in a situation like that, be it an eagle or an owl, the trick is to relax, and they will loosen their grip. If they start to fly away with you, boy, is that a strong eagle.
I don't think any of our viewers are going to be in that situation, hopefully. But just in case.
Help me.
Just in case, right? Awesome presentation as always, Dave. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us this evening and all the great questions. So many awesome questions and stories. We love hearing them. It makes it a lot more fun for us in our webinar when we get so much interaction. So thank you. Once again, Dave, thanks for a great presentation. Thank you, Thomas, for joining us as well and volunteering this evening.
Thank you as well.
And I posted all of the links to Dave's videos at the start of this webinar. So just scroll up right now and you should see the links there. And they're also on our Facebook page too. So if you want to go back and watch, you can do so. So thank you, everyone, and have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.